The warm scent of garlic and rosemary greeted me as I pushed open the glass door of Marcello's, the new Italian restaurant in our neighborhood. After a grueling 14-hour shift at the hospital, all I wanted was my pre-ordered lasagna and a hot bath. The hostess smiled in recognition. "Just a few more minutes, Mrs. Hargrove. The chef's finishing your order now." I nodded, grateful. Being a surgical nurse at Boston General came with unpredictable hours, and tonight had been especially punishing. My body ached from standing through a complex cardiac procedure, and all I could think about was getting back to our brownstone in Beacon Hill, home, where my husband of 15 years, Ralph, was probably grading papers for his university students. As I waited, I glanced around the softly lit restaurant. Smooth jazz drifted through the air. Couples leaned close, fingers brushing across tables. Families laughed between shared plates. Then my gaze caught on a familiar profile in the back corner booth. Ralph. My Ralph. But he wasn't home grading papers. He was here, twirling pasta around his fork and lifting it toward the glossy lips of our neighbor, Diana Preston. The fork hovered between them as she leaned forward, eyes locked on his. She parted her lips and took the bite with a smile that made my stomach tighten. Ralph reached up and brushed a strand of her hair aside with a tenderness that turned my blood cold. "Mrs. Hargrove, your order's ready," the hostess said, her voice sounding far away, muffled like underwater. I couldn't move. 15 steps away, Ralph laughed at something Diana said, covering her hand with his. I knew that laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he was genuinely amused. Then, as if sensing my stare, he looked up. Our eyes met. His smile vanished. The color drained from his face. Diana followed his gaze, confusion flickering into recognition, and then something that looked like triumph. "Are you okay, ma'am?" the hostess asked gently, touching my elbow. I steadied myself against the counter. "Actually, I'm not feeling very well. Could you add a tiramisu to my order? And a bottle of your house red?" My voice sounded strange to me, calm, polite, almost cheerful. Ralph was half standing now, panic etched across his features, but Diana's hand shot out, gripping his wrist to keep him seated. Smart woman. If he had come over, I wasn't sure what I would have done. I accepted my expanded order with a generous tip and a smile that felt plastered on. As I pushed open the door, I looked back one last time. Ralph was frantically texting, his dinner ruined. Diana stared straight at me, one perfectly arched eyebrow raised in silent challenge. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, my thoughts spinning. I wasn't just Meline Hargrove, the devoted wife, anymore. I was Meline Hargrove, surgical nurse, someone who had helped save countless lives. And now, it was time to save my own. What Ralph didn't know was that I'd suspected something for weeks. Tonight's confirmation was exactly what I needed to set my plan in motion. I didn't confront him. Instead, I went home, poured a glass of the wine, and ate my lasagna at the kitchen island. When Ralph burst through the door 2 hours later, wild-eyed and breathless, I was calmly reading a medical journal. "Meline, thank God, I've been calling you." His voice trembled with panic. "My phone died at work. Long surgery today," I replied evenly. He hesitated, confusion replacing his fear. "You didn't see me earlier?" I blinked. "See you where?" His shoulders slumped in visible relief. "Nowhere, I was worried when you didn't answer." "That's sweet," I said, turning a page. "There's leftover lasagna if you're hungry." "I already ate," he blurted, then winced. "With colleagues from the department. Budget meeting ran late." I nodded as though I believed him. "I'm heading to bed. Early shift tomorrow." As I passed him, his familiar cologne reached me, mixed with something floral that wasn't mine. Diana's perfume. I'd smelled it at neighborhood barbecues, when she'd lingered too close to my husband. "Meline, wait," Ralph said, catching my wrist. "Is everything okay? You seem off." I smiled and met his eyes. "I'm just tired, Ralph. We can talk tomorrow." That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his fake, rhythmic breathing. We'd met during my first year as a nurse. He, a charming English professor with kind eyes and a passion for literature. I'd fallen for his intelligence, his wit, his warmth after my hardest days. 15 years, no children by mutual choice, but a beautiful life we'd built together. A life he was now desecrating, with the divorcee next door, whose own husband had left her for his secretary in the most cliché way imaginable. When morning came, I was already dressed by the time Ralph stirred. He looked startled to see me putting on earrings by the mirror. "You're up early," he said. "Meeting with the hospital board," I replied. "Don't forget we have dinner with your dean tomorrow night." His face fell. "Actually, I meant to tell you, I have to present at a department seminar." "I was going to call and cancel," he said. Another lie. I simply nodded. "No problem. I'll go alone. Dean Patterson always asks about your Victorian literature course. I'll tell him it's still the department's pride and joy." Ralph hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. "You don't have to do that." "It's fine," I replied smoothly. "We're a team, right?" I leaned down and kissed his cheek, noting the subtle way he flinched beneath my lips. At work, I moved through my shift like a machine. During lunch, I called my best friend Zoe Chen, a sharp divorce attorney whose husband had pulled a similar betrayal 3 years earlier. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "It's happening." There was a pause. "Ralph, with Diana, the neighbor." Her sigh was heavy. "Come by my office after your shift. Don't confront him yet. Don't tip your hand. And Meline, document everything." That afternoon, instead of heading to a board meeting, I drove straight to the bank. I opened a separate account and quietly transferred half our savings, perfectly legal in Massachusetts before any divorce filings. Then I made my way to Zoe's downtown office. Her assistant ushered me right in. Zoe stood to embrace me, her sleek bob swinging forward. "How are you holding up?" she asked, studying my face. "Surprisingly calm," I admitted. "I think I've been preparing for this moment for months." Zoe nodded knowingly. She'd been the same, practical, methodical, focused on survival rather than heartbreak. The emotional collapse would come later. We both understood that. For now, clarity was my ally. "I need to be smart about this," I said, accepting the glass of water she handed me. "I need evidence." "Massachusetts is a no-fault state," Zoe reminded me. "But proof of infidelity can still influence property division and alimony." I leaned forward. "Our brownstone is in both our names, but I made the down payment with my inheritance. My salary's higher than his, but he has tenure." Zoe grabbed a legal pad. "Okay, let's talk strategy. How much do you want to walk away with?" "Everything I'm entitled to," I said firmly, and after a beat added, "and a little bit of justice." Her lips curved into a small, predatory smile. "That I can help with. First, we need solid evidence." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. "I know a private investigator, discreet, reliable, and he owes me a favor." "How long will it take?" I asked. "Give me a week," she said. "In the meantime, act normal. Keep a record of Ralph's excuses. When he's late, what reasons he gives, any strange calls or texts." I nodded, already mentally replaying months of suspicious faculty meetings and student consultations. As I left Zoe's office, my phone buzzed. A text from Ralph, working late tonight. "Don't wait up." I smiled grimly at the screen. Predictable. What wasn't predictable was what I planned to do next. While Ralph believed he was being careful, I was already 3 steps ahead. The private investigator would start tailing him at sunrise. For the next week, I played my role flawlessly. I worked my hospital shifts, made dinner, and maintained every piece of our normal routine. Ralph began to relax, convinced I'd seen nothing that night at Marcello's. He even grew careless, leaving his phone unlocked, dropping Diana's name into casual conversation. Diana mentioned a new hiking trail she discovered. He said one morning over breakfast, testing the waters. "Maybe we should try it sometime," I smiled sweetly. "That sounds nice. You know how much I love nature." His relief was palpable. I almost pitied him. Almost. On Friday evening, I met with Harrison Wells, Zoe's investigator, in a quiet coffee shop 3 towns over. He was a grizzled man with a smoker's rasp. Sliding a manila envelope across the table, he said, "They're not exactly subtle. 3 meetings this week. Tuesday lunch at the Harborview Hotel, Wednesday afternoon at her place." He stayed about 3 hours. And last night, dinner at Marcello's again, followed by her house until 2 in the morning. I opened the envelope. The photos were crisp and damning. Ralph and Diana walking hand in hand along the waterfront, kissing in her doorway, his car parked in her driveway past midnight. "There's more," Harrison added, passing me a slim USB drive. "Audio from the restaurant. They always sit at the same table. Wasn't hard to plant a mic. Is that legal?" I asked, arching a brow. He shrugged. "Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state. Consider this for your personal knowledge, not court." I nodded, slipping the drive into my purse. "What do they talk about?" "Mostly each other," he said. "Some complaints about you, your hours, how you're emotionally distant." His words, not mine. A cold knot formed in my stomach. "Anything else I should know?" Harrison hesitated. "He's talking about taking a sabbatical next semester. They mentioned traveling together. Europe." My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. Ralph and I had dreamed of a European trip for years, always putting it off for work. Now he wanted to take her. "She's also pushing him to sell the brownstone," Harrison continued. "Says it's too full of, quote, marital energy. Whatever that means. The brownstone. The home my grandparents helped us buy. The one I'd restored room by room with my own hands. Thank you, Harrison." I handed him an envelope of cash. "Will you continue for another week?" He nodded. "Already on it. I'll have more for you next Friday." That night, while Ralph was supposedly at a faculty retreat, actually at Diana's, according to Harrison's latest text update, I sat in my home office and plugged the USB drive into my laptop. Their voices filled the room, echoing through the quiet space that had once been ours. They were laughing softly, discussing wine pairings and travel dreams. Then Ralph's tone shifted, low and conflicted. "I need to figure out how to tell her," he said. "It's not fair to keep living this double life." Diana's voice came smooth, self-assured. "You said yourself she's barely home. Always at the hospital. When's the last time she made you feel special?" "That's not entirely fair," Ralph protested weakly. "Her work saves lives." "And what about your life, Ralph? Don't you deserve happiness?" "Don't we?" There was a pause, the faint clink of glasses. "I love you," he said finally, voice thick with sincerity. "I know that much." "Then make a choice," Diana urged. "I'm not getting any younger. Neither are you. We could have a few good years together before everything starts sagging." They laughed. That was when I stopped the recording. My stomach churned. Hearing Ralph declare love for another woman, no matter how much I'd already suspected, cut deeper than I'd anticipated. I sat there in silence, letting the weight of it sink in. My phone pinged. A text from Zoe. "How are you holding up?" I typed back only 2 words. "Ready now." The next morning, Ralph came home looking lighter, almost joyful. He even brought me coffee in bed, something he hadn't done in years. "I thought we could go to that new exhibit at the MFA today," he said, sitting beside me. "Just the 2 of us?" Guilt. That was all it was, his clumsy attempt at penance. "That sounds wonderful," I said, accepting the mug. "But first I need to talk to you about something important." His expression tightened. "What is it?" I took a steadying breath, ready to launch phase 2. "I've been offered a temporary position with Doctors Without Borders. 3 months in Ethiopia, training local nurses in trauma care." His jaw fell open. "Ethiopia? For 3 months? You can't be serious." "It's an incredible opportunity," I continued, calm and convincing. "Something I've always wanted to do. But what about us? Your job, our life here?" I sipped my coffee slowly. "I thought you'd be supportive. This has been my dream for years, Ralph." "You never mentioned this dream to me," he snapped. "I have. Probably while you were preoccupied with departmental politics." He looked away, ashamed. "When would it start?" 3 weeks from now. I've already requested the leave from the hospital. They're thrilled to support it." I could see the calculations behind his eyes. 3 months of freedom. Time to play house with Diana without sneaking around. If it's really what you want, he said finally, forcing a smile, then I support you. Thank you, I said, squeezing his hand. That means everything to me. Of course, there was no Doctors Without Borders assignment. But Ralph didn't need to know that. What he really didn't know was that my so-called trip would be the perfect cover for what came next. The following weeks were a study in precision. I shopped for humanitarian gear, downloaded Ethiopian travel guides, and staged phone calls with an imaginary program coordinator named Sophia. Ralph played the devoted husband, making packing lists, ordering mosquito nets, offering to drive me to the airport. His attentiveness might have been touching if I didn't already know from Harrison's reports that he'd nearly moved half his clothes into Diana's house. He's practically living there, Harrison said during our last meeting. They've also been browsing listings for vacation homes in Vermont. I nodded, unsurprised. Diana had always bragged about wanting a ski chalet up north. Anything else? I asked. He handed me another envelope. Credit card statements. He's been spending freely. Jewelry, high-end dinners, weekend trips labeled as academic conferences. I scanned the receipts. The diamond earrings Diana had worn at the last neighborhood cookout gleamed in my memory. Now I knew who'd bought them. He's using our joint credit card for some of this, I said coolly. Classic mistake, Harrison replied. Makes our job easier. 2 days before my departure, I met Zoe for dinner to finalize our plan. We sat in a quiet, private room, candlelight flickering between us. Everything's in place, she confirmed, lowering her voice. Once you give me the signal, I'll file. The forensic accountant has mapped out every asset, the private accounts, the retirement funds he thought you didn't know about, the investment portfolio he started with Diana. I froze mid-sip. What investment portfolio? Zoe blinked, startled. Harrison didn't mention it? They opened a joint investment account last month. He transferred about $30,000 from his personal savings. The money we'd been saving for home renovations. Money I believed was still sitting safely in our account. I want everything, I said, my resolve solidifying. Every last penny he's legally bound to give me, and then some. Zoe gave my hand a reassuring pat. And you'll get it. Your paperwork is airtight. The judge I'm requesting has zero tolerance for smug academics who think they're smarter than the court. The night before my supposed flight, Ralph prepared a special dinner at home. He made my favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, opened a pricey bottle of wine, and even bought flowers. To your adventure, he toasted, clinking glasses. I'm proud of you, Maddie. The nickname he hadn't used in years. I smiled, playing my part. Thank you for understanding. Not every husband would. Well, I've always supported your career, he lied smoothly. And I'll be fine here. Lots of papers to grade, research to finish, he continued. And a mistress to entertain, I added silently. After dinner, he led me to the bedroom, clearly intending a romantic farewell. I didn't refuse. In a twisted way, I wanted that final connection. A closing chapter to what we'd once been, before I destroyed it all completely. The next morning, Ralph drove me to the airport, helped me check in my neatly packed luggage, and hugged me tightly at security. Call me when you land, he said, eyes soft with what looked like genuine sadness. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, I replied, meaning it in a way he couldn't possibly comprehend. I would miss who I thought he was. Who we had been. I walked through security and waited until he was gone. Then, instead of heading to my gate, I exited through another terminal where Zoe waited in her car. Ready? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. Ready, I confirmed. We drove to her secluded lakeside cabin, my secret hideaway for the next phase. Remote, tranquil, and completely off Ralph's radar, it was the perfect headquarters. As Zoe helped me unpack, my phone buzzed. A text from Ralph. Miss you already. Have a safe flight. Love you. Almost at the same moment, Harrison sent a photo, Ralph picking up Diana for lunch less than an hour after dropping me off. Now we begin, I told Zoe, showing her both messages. Phase 2. For the next 2 weeks, I kept up the illusion. I emailed Ralph detailed updates about my work in Ethiopia, descriptions carefully crafted from my research. Our rare phone calls were filled with static, my voice always tired yet content. He replied with stories about department gossip and home maintenance, never mentioning Diana. Meanwhile, Harrison's surveillance captured their growing boldness, luxury dinners, theater outings, nights spent together. They're heading to Vermont next weekend, he reported. Romantic bed and breakfast in Stowe. He told the department it's a conference in Chicago. I nodded, jotting notes. Perfect timing. That's when we move. The plan was meticulous. While Ralph was in Vermont with Diana, movers would come to the brownstone, not to empty it, but to quietly remove select items, family heirlooms, irreplaceable keepsakes, and documents I didn't want in his reach. The day before their trip, I received a text from Diana. Hope you're enjoying Africa. Don't worry about things at home. Everything's being taken care of. The audacity made me laugh aloud. She truly had no clue what was coming. That night, Zoe and I reviewed every last detail. The divorce papers were finalized, financial evidence organized, locks scheduled to be changed during Ralph's absence. His belongings would be packed and stored, the unit key attached to the divorce packet. You're certain about this? Zoe asked softly. It's aggressive. There's no turning back. I met her steady gaze. He's planning a future with her, using my money, in my house, living my dreams. He doesn't get to keep any of it, Zoe nodded. Then let's make sure he doesn't. The morning Ralph and Diana left for Vermont, I watched from Harrison's surveillance van as they loaded their bags. Diana wore a red dress I recognized, the same one Ralph had once complimented at a faculty party. They looked so carefree, so certain. They had no idea that while they drove off to their romantic weekend, every piece of Ralph's carefully built life was being dismantled. The wife he believed was continents away was, in truth, orchestrating his downfall just miles from home. At 10 a.m. sharp, the locksmith arrived, 30 minutes after I confirmed their departure. He replaced every lock in the brownstone under my supervision. By noon, Ralph's key would no longer fit the door he thought was his. Then came the movers, quiet professionals who specialized in high-conflict divorces. They photographed every room for documentation. Then began the careful process of separating assets. Personal items only today, I instructed. Family photos, heirlooms, irreplaceable documents. The rest stays exactly where it is. I moved from room to room, pointing out what was mine by inheritance or sentiment, my grandmother's antique clock, photo albums from before Ralph entered my life, my medical awards and certifications, the quilt my mother made for our wedding. That one hurt the most, but I couldn't bear the idea of Diana ever touching it. In Ralph's office, I opened his desk drawers methodically. Most contained what I expected: academic papers, department memos, student evaluations. Then, tucked behind his reference books, I found a small velvet box. Inside lay a platinum necklace with a sapphire pendant, the receipt still folded in the lid, purchased 3 days ago for over $2,000. Not for me, obviously. An anniversary gift for Diana, perhaps. I added it to the evidence pile. Continuing my search, I came across a folder labeled New Beginnings. Inside were printouts of Vermont properties, one marked perfect in Diana's looping handwriting. There were also travel itineraries for Paris, Rome, and Barcelona, all scheduled during my supposed time in Ethiopia. Most damning was a draft letter to his department chair requesting a sabbatical. This time away will allow me to complete my manuscript and begin a new chapter in my personal life as well. I photographed everything, then returned it exactly as I'd found it. Ralph needed to realize he'd been discovered, but not yet. Timing was everything. By evening, the movers were done. My personal treasures were secured at Zoe's cabin, and the legal documents rested safely with our attorney. The brownstone looked almost untouched, yet something in its air had shifted. Like Ralph himself, it maintained appearances while hiding a quiet, calculated transformation. Final step for today: I told Zoe as we surveyed the house. The accounts. We drove to the bank where I executed the financial plan we'd prepared weeks earlier. I didn't empty our accounts. That would have crossed a line. But I protected my rightful share, transferring specific sums into secure holdings Ralph couldn't access. Your name remains on everything, the banker assured me. You're simply reallocating funds within your rights. And the notifications? I asked. As arranged, all electronic alerts have been redirected to your new email. Perfect, I said. Ralph wouldn't know a thing until it was far too late. The next day, while Ralph and Diana enjoyed their cozy Vermont escape, I met with Dr. Patterson, the dean of Ralph's department and, coincidentally, a former patient of mine. I'd removed his gallstone 2 years ago. He'd never forgotten. Meline. What a pleasant surprise, he greeted warmly in his home office. I thought you were overseas. That's actually what I came to discuss, I said, accepting a cup of tea. I'm dealing with a personal situation involving Ralph, and I need your discretion. Concern creased his features. Of course. How can I help? I spoke carefully, without bitterness, presenting select pieces of evidence, Ralph's affair, his false sabbatical plans. I'm not here to destroy his career, I clarified. I just want you to understand why certain changes are about to happen. Better you hear it from me than through rumors. Dr. Patterson removed his glasses, clearly unsettled but sympathetic. I appreciate your professionalism, Meline. This explains some inconsistencies I've noticed. Inconsistencies? He hesitated. Ralph's been missing meetings, canceling classes last minute. Students have complained. I assumed it was stress from his manuscript. I gave a small nod. He's been otherwise occupied. His sabbatical request? The dean continued. He submitted it last week. The committee was leaning toward approval. But sabbaticals are for research, not personal reinvention. We'll need to reevaluate his application. I didn't smile, though satisfaction simmered quietly inside me. Ralph's reputation wouldn't be ruined, just carefully, professionally stalled. As I rose to leave, Dr. Patterson asked softly, Are you all right, Meline? This must be terribly difficult. For the first time since discovering Ralph's betrayal, I allowed a sliver of honesty. It's painful, I admitted, but I'll be fine. I have my work. And good friends, he nodded. The medical community is lucky to have you. Please reach out if you need anything, professionally or otherwise. That evening, I checked in with Harrison, who was still tracking Ralph's trip. They're having a grand old time, he reported. Champagne by the fireplace, talking about summer vacations. She keeps mentioning redecorating your bedroom once you're officially out of the picture. My jaw clenched. Send me the audio. An hour later, I listened to their laughter and whispered plans through my headphones, my expression calm, my heart steel. Then, with Zoe by my side, I reviewed our final checklist. The papers will be served Monday morning, she confirmed, at his office, as requested, for maximum professional embarrassment. The house security is updated, cameras installed at all entry points. If he tries to break in, we'll have proof. I nodded, methodically crossing items off my list. And his belongings? Packed tomorrow. Only essentials per legal requirement. Everything else stays until the court decides. By Sunday night, as Ralph and Diana drove home from their idyllic weekend, I returned to the brownstone for one last task. I placed an envelope on Ralph's pillow containing just 3 things: a copy of their Vermont reservation, a photo of them kissing at Marcello's, and a single note that read, I know everything. Don't come home. Your attorney will contact you. Then I removed my wedding ring, set it beside the envelope, and walked out of the bedroom we had shared for 15 years. Downstairs, I paused for one final look at the home we'd built together. For all his betrayal, there had been good years here once, but those memories now belonged to someone else, a different version of me who still believed in her husband's love. I locked the door with my new key and drove away without looking back. When Ralph returned, what awaited him wasn't just locked doors and missing belongings. It was the careful dismantling of the double life he had created, executed by the wife he had so profoundly underestimated. The woman he'd thought of as gentle and trusting had turned into something far sharper, a strategist forged by betrayal. Ralph discovered he was locked out at exactly 10:37 p.m. on Sunday. I know because the security cameras recorded every moment, his confusion as his key failed, his pounding on the door growing more frantic. "Meline!" he shouted, voice echoing thinly through the audio feed. "What the hell is going on? Open the door!" Diana appeared behind him, her post-weekend glow dimming to anxiety. "Maybe the lock jammed. Try the back door." They disappeared for a moment, returning minutes later. Ralph tried calling me repeatedly, but my phone went straight to voicemail, exactly as planned. After half an hour of failed attempts, including a clumsy effort to pry open a window that triggered a silent alarm to my phone, they finally gave up. The camera caught Diana's weary voice as they left. "You can stay at my place tonight. We'll figure it out tomorrow." Monday morning marked the next phase. At 9:15 a.m., while Ralph sat in a department meeting, a process server entered the building. Harrison's footage captured the precise moment Ralph was handed the divorce papers. His expression drained of color, hands trembling as he opened the envelope in front of his colleagues. By noon, my phone was flooded, with messages from Ralph, mutual friends, neighbors, even his mother. "What's happening? There must be some mistake. Please call me." I ignored them all except one. To his mother, Selenor, a woman I'd always respected, I sent a short reply. "I'm sorry you're caught in this, Selenor. Ralph can explain why this is happening. I've always valued your kindness." At 2:00 p.m., Ralph tried to access our joint investment account, only to discover that withdrawals over $100 now required dual authorization. At 2:17, he attempted to use our emergency credit card, which had been quietly canceled. By 3:45, he showed up at the brownstone with a locksmith, only to be intercepted when the new security system alerted authorities the residence is in dispute during divorce proceedings. My pre-prepared statement informed the responding officers. "Mrs. Hargrove has legal occupancy until the court rules otherwise." By evening, Ralph was unraveling. His final text to me said it all. "You weren't in Ethiopia, were you? This whole thing was a setup. I know I made mistakes, but this is cruel. Meline, Diana says I should fight you for everything. But I just want to talk, please." I forwarded it to Zoe without replying. "He's playing the victim already," she noted dryly. "Predictable. What's your next move?" "Wait," I replied. "Let him stew. Tomorrow we launch Phase 2. Phase 2 began at dawn. While Ralph slept at Diana's, a courier delivered a package to her doorstep. Inside, printed photos of every rendezvous they'd had during my supposed absence, along with a detailed time-stamped record of their affair spanning 6 months. On top, a handwritten note. "Diana, I thought you should know exactly how long he's been lying to both of us. Did he tell you he was still sleeping with me the entire time he was seeing you? Ask him about our special dinner the night before my trip." It was a calculated risk, but it worked beautifully. At 7:23 a.m., Harrison's audio picked up shouting from Diana's townhouse. By 8:05, Ralph was sitting alone in his car outside, head in his hands. The professional fallout followed swiftly. Dean Patterson called an emergency meeting, and the sabbatical committee reconsidered Ralph's request after learning about his non-existent manuscript progress. Sabbatical denied, Harrison later reported. Pending substantial written work. He's also on probation for the semester, missed classes, student complaints. I allowed myself a quiet, satisfied smile. Not career-ending, but certainly career-complicating. That afternoon, Ralph finally retained a lawyer, a mid-level attorney from a downtown firm known for quick settlements rather than aggressive fights. "Perfect," Zoe said when she received their first communication. "He's going for the easy route. They're offering a 50-50 split if you agree to settle quietly." I laughed. Not a chance. Counter with our full demands. Our counteroffer was clear and firm. The brownstone remained entirely mine, since my inheritance had funded the down payment. 70% of our joint investments reflecting my higher contributions, and full ownership of the main vacation property gifted by my parents. Ralph's attorney responded just as we'd expected. "This is punitive and unreasonable," he said flatly. Zoe, composed as ever, leaned forward. "We have extensive documentation of both financial and personal infidelity." Mr. Hargrove diverted joint funds to sustain his extramarital relationship, made significant purchases for his paramour using marital assets, and attempted to liquidate jointly owned property without Mrs. Hargrove's knowledge or consent. She paused deliberately. "We're prepared to present all evidence in open court if necessary. My client is a highly respected medical professional whose reputation remains unblemished. Is your client prepared for the public scrutiny of his actions?" By Wednesday, Ralph was desperate to speak to me directly. He made the mistake of showing up at the hospital during my shift. My colleagues, well informed through the hospital grapevine, formed an unspoken wall between us. "Dr. Wilson said to tell you Professor Hargrove was escorted from the premises," my favorite nurse, Tamika, reported with barely concealed satisfaction. "Security's got his photo now. He won't get past the front desk again." That evening, I finally agreed to a meeting. Not with Ralph alone, but with both legal teams present. We convened in Zoe's office, tension thick in the conference room air. Ralph looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, the dark circles beneath his eyes deep as bruises. He stared at me with a blend of anger, confusion, and something that resembled genuine pain. "Before we begin," I said evenly, "I want to be clear. This isn't a reconciliation meeting. It's to finalize our separation with as little additional drama as possible." "Maddie, please," he began. "Ms. Hargrove," Zoe corrected sharply. "Professional titles only." Ralph's attorney, Martin Walsh, cleared his throat. "My client is prepared to be generous despite the unconventional way this process began." "Unconventional?" I echoed, arching a brow. "Is that what we're calling a 6-month affair with our neighbor, financed with marital funds?" Walsh flushed. "We dispute the characterization of financial impropriety." Without a word, Zoe slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, credit card records, receipts for jewelry, weekend getaways, and lavish dinners, all aligning perfectly with the timeline of Ralph's affair. "Total diverted funds, approximately $42,000 over 6 months, she said. Ralph paled. "That's not possible. We have receipts," I said simply. "For everything." The meeting dragged on for nearly 3 hours. Ralph alternated between defensiveness and emotional manipulation, bringing up our early years, insisting Diana was a mistake, trying to cast himself as the remorseful husband. I remained unmoved. By the end, his lawyer was practically pleading for compromise. "We'll accept the loss of the main property," Walsh conceded. "But the brownstone should be sold, and the proceeds divided." "The brownstone stays with Ms. Hargrove," Zoe countered smoothly. "However, we'll consider adjusting the investment split to 65-35 instead of 70-30. When it was clear no further progress would be made, I rose, signaling the meeting's end. "Consider your position carefully," I told Ralph. "Your next court date is in 3 weeks. Until then, you'll remain without access to most of our assets or property. The longer you delay, the more this costs you, financially and professionally." His expression hardened. "You've become cold, Meline. I don't even recognize you anymore." I gathered my papers calmly. "I'm exactly who I've always been, Ralph. You just never noticed my strength." "That was your mistake." As Zoe and I exited, I heard his defeated sigh, the sound of a man realizing he was truly outmatched. That night, my phone buzzed with an unexpected voicemail from Diana. "Meline, it's Diana. I need to talk to you about Ralph. There are things you should know. Things he's been saying about you, about your marriage. Things that aren't true. Please call me back." I played the message for Zoe during our morning strategy session. "She's turning on him," Zoe observed, amused. "Didn't think she'd flip this fast. Should I call her?" I asked. "Not yet," Zoe decided. "Let's see what she does next." What Diana did next exceeded our expectations. She sent an email to both of us, screenshots of messages from Ralph trashing me, planning their future in my house, and most damningly, discussing how to move more of our joint funds before my supposed return from Ethiopia. Her note read, "I realize I've been terrible to you, but I was manipulated too. He told me your marriage was over, that you were distant and career-obsessed. Now I see he was playing us both. I don't expect forgiveness, but you deserve the truth." It was self-serving. Of course, Diana trying to save herself from the wreckage, but the evidence was invaluable. "This changes everything," Zoe said, grinning. "His own mistress just gave us proof of attempted financial misconduct. The judge will destroy him." When Ralph learned of Diana's betrayal, his attorney could barely keep him in the fight. By Friday, just 5 days after being served, Ralph caved. He agreed to nearly all our terms, with only minor adjustments. The brownstone remained mine. The main property remained mine. Investments were split 65-35 in my favor. Ralph kept his academic pension and personal belongings, now boxed and in storage. I assumed no responsibility for his credit card debt, most of which had financed his affair. "He's finished," Zoe said as we reviewed the final draft of the settlement. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe, completely and utterly defeated. I didn't feel joy, only a calm, quiet satisfaction that justice had finally been served. The man who'd betrayed 15 years of marriage had lost nearly everything he valued, all because he had underestimated the wife he believed was safely out of the way. What Ralph never understood, even as he signed away his claims to the life we once shared, was that his betrayal hadn't broken me. It had revealed a strength and strategic mind he'd never cared to notice in all our years together. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the newly renovated kitchen of my brownstone, admiring the Carrara marble countertops and the custom cabinetry I'd always wanted, luxuries Ralph had once dismissed as unnecessary. Morning light poured through the windows, now free of the heavy drapes he'd insisted on, filling the space with warmth and quiet possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Ready for your new beginning?" Today marked the official launch of our joint venture, a consulting firm offering financial and legal guidance to women navigating high-conflict divorces. What had started as my personal survival plan had evolved into a business model designed to help others reclaim their power. "On my way," I replied, gathering my presentation materials. As I locked the front door, with keys that belonged to me alone, I glanced across the street at Diana's townhouse. She'd moved out weeks after the settlement, unable to endure the neighborhood gossip. The property sat empty now, a silent monument to plans that had disintegrated. Ralph hadn't fared much better. Department gossip, reliable as ever, reported that he'd been denied tenure advancement due to his personal difficulties and erratic professional behavior. The last I heard, he'd taken a position at a small community college in Arizona, about as far from Boston's elite academic world as one could fall. I felt no satisfaction in his decline, only a sense that balance had finally been restored. Actions had consequences. Trust, once broken, exacted its price. At the downtown office Zoe and I had leased, our first clients were already waiting. 3 women with stories hauntingly similar to mine. Successful professionals whose husbands had mistaken their dedication for neglect, their ambition for absence. "Before we begin," I said after introductions, "I want to make something clear. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice and self-preservation. It's about ensuring that the lives you've worked for aren't taken from you by someone who once promised partnership." The women nodded, their expressions solemn but resolute. "The legal system won't give you emotional closure," Zoe added, "but with the right documentation and timing, it can give you protection and fairness." For the next 2 hours, I shared my story not as a confession, but as a case study in preparation, strategy, and self-advocacy. I walked them through the documentation process, the importance of financial awareness, the need for emotional restraint. The most powerful weapon in these situations, I explained, is information. Knowledge they don't realize you have. Resources they don't know you can access. Strength they've chosen not to see. When the session ended, the women left with a new steadiness in their eyes. Zoe raised her coffee cup in a toast. To unexpected new chapters, she said. 1 year ago, could you have imagined this? I shook my head, thinking of the woman I'd been, devoted to my career, loyal to my marriage, blind to the betrayal under my own roof. A year ago, I said softly, I thought my life was settled. Predictable but safe. I never asked for this kind of upheaval. I paused, truly considering it. The pain had been real, the disappointment sharp, but in the aftermath I'd discovered capabilities I might never have known otherwise. Sometimes, I said finally, the worst betrayals force us to become who we were meant to be all along. Ralph thought he knew exactly who I was, I continued quietly. What I'd tolerate, how I'd react. His biggest mistake wasn't the affair, it was underestimating who he was dealing with. That evening, I returned to the brownstone. No longer our home, but entirely mine. I had redecorated from top to bottom, erasing every trace of Ralph's heavy, academic style in favor of clean lines and soft modernity. The transformation was more than aesthetic. It was symbolic, a reclamation of space and self. As I prepared dinner, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. Meline. Ralph's voice came through, hesitant, almost brittle. Please don't hang up. I nearly did, but curiosity won. What do you want, Ralph? He paused as if summoning courage. I wanted to apologize, properly. What I did was unforgivable, I see that now. Why now? I asked, genuinely curious. It's been months. Because I finally understand what I threw away, he said, his voice trembling slightly. The life we had. Who you are. I was so lost in my own ego that I never saw your strength until it was turned against me. I stayed silent, letting him speak. Diana left me as soon as the money ran out, he admitted bitterly. My new position is humbling. The apartment's small. My colleagues barely acknowledge me. Everything I thought mattered, status, reputation, recognition, it's gone. That sounds difficult, I said evenly, offering neither sympathy nor cruelty. He hesitated before continuing. I heard about your new business venture. It sounds exactly right for you. You always were the strategic one. I just never appreciated it. Was there a specific reason for this call? I asked, unwilling to be pulled into his nostalgia. He sighed. I suppose I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, what I lost, and that I am sorry, Meline. Truly sorry. The apology lingered between us, perhaps sincere, but ultimately meaningless. No words could rebuild what had been so deliberately dismantled. I accept your apology, Ralph, I said at last, and I wish you well in Arizona. But our chapter is closed. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen, my space, my life, and felt the last trace of heaviness dissolve. Ralph's acknowledgement didn't change the past, but it confirmed what I had long come to believe, that my reaction to betrayal had revealed my truest self, not just to him or to Diana, but most importantly to me. The following weekend, I hosted a dinner for my closest allies, Zoe, Tamika from the hospital, and a few other friends who had supported me through the divorce. As we gathered around the table, I had chosen without consulting anyone's preferences but my own. I raised my glass. To endings that become beginnings, I toasted, and to discovering that we are always stronger than we think. The glasses clinked in agreement, the sound ringing bright and certain through the home that was now unmistakably mine, not by default or settlement, but because I had fought for it with a resolve that surprised everyone but, ultimately, myself. When the evening quieted after my guests left, I stepped onto my back terrace and gazed at the Boston skyline glowing against the night. The path ahead wasn't entirely clear, but it was mine to choose. Professionally respected, financially steady, and emotionally wiser, I had come through not just whole, but transformed. The woman who once waited for takeout while her husband shared dinner with another woman across town no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, surer, and perhaps for the first time, completely herself.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.